Mason and Hamlin, and the history of the cabinet organ. Factories. Instruments. Disasters. Technique. Advertising. And awards. Cabinet organ, also known as the American organ. In ancient China, it was believed that sounds, emerged from a human being's inner emotions, is music, while the sounds of nature are simply sounds. It was believed that a state's music reflected its people's feelings and social morals. It was recognized that music education could change social and cultural practices, awaken inner emotions, and promote good character. Music was seen as essential to the harmony and survival of the state, and it was believed that raw and uncultured music could lead to the fall of a state. 3,000 years later, with the Declaration of Independence of the United States, a new state was created. Since the USA still exists today, cultivated music must have existed, because raw, uncultivated music would lead, according to this ancient Chinese wisdom, to the fall of a state. Was it music that made the USA so big and powerful? In this video we look at one musical instrument that was very important for the establishment of cultivated music in the new state, USA. Some of the first instruments developed in the USA were free reed organs. Free reed is a technique whereby a metal strip mounted on a frame is blown with wind, causing it to vibrate. The air interruptions are recognized as sound. The pitch can be changed by length, width, or thickness of the metal or reed strip. The ancient Chinese already used a free reed music instrument in their cultivated music. Free reed organ, since 1100 BCE. The first cabinet organ, with free reed technique, was developed in the USA in 1861. Developed by Mason and Hamlin, in Boston, Massachusetts. The cabinet organ became the American organ. The most popular and successful musical instrument in the USA, in the 19th century. The American organ was built millions of times, and sold all over the world. But today, the American organ has disappeared. It can only be found in museums, or restored by enthusiasts. If you search for Mason and Hamlin today, you will find a manufacturer of high-quality upright pianos and grand pianos. In Haverhill, Massachusetts, USA. But if you had searched for Mason and Hamlin 170 years ago, you would have found a small factory, in Boston, at the corner Cambridge-Charles Street. The history of the cabinet organ, from 1846 to 1930. 1. The foundation of Mason and Hamlin. On the Mason and Hamlin Piano Company website you will find a brief summary of the company's history, with drawings of the founders. Opening text. In 1854, Henry Mason and Emmons Hamlin founded Mason and Hamlin in Boston, Massachusetts, driven by a shared vision to craft the finest musical instruments. The Cambridge Chronicle of 1875 tells that Mason and Hamlin took over 2 or 3 rooms in a building near the corner of Charles and Cambridge Streets, in Boston in 1854. In the Music Trade Review of January 24, 1920 it can be read that the first building was limited and made of wood. A map of Boston from 1852 shows the spot where the first Mason and Hamlin plant was located then. Mason and Hamlin began manufacturing free reed organ instruments in 1854. In the first year, they built a few hundred Melodeon models. The improved Melodeon was developed in the USA before the cabinet organ in 1847. Developed by Jeremiah Carhart, George A. Prince, and Elias Parkman Needham in Buffalo, New York. The improved Melodeon was the first free reed organ in the USA, and maybe worldwide, with suction wind bellows technique. George A. Prince, one of the co-inventors of the improved Melodeon, began manufacturing Melodeons in a factory in Buffalo, New York, in 1847. George A. Prince employed some of the best carpenters and craftsmen in the USA, who were always looking for ways to improve the Melodeon. One of these employees was Emmons Hamlin. Emmons Hamlin, foreman and superintendent of tuning at George A. Prince Buffalo, New York, USA, since about 1847. Emmons Hamlin experimented with the free reeds of the Melodeon. He developed a bending and twisting technique that made it possible to change the sound characteristics of the free reeds. Emmons Hamlin invented the free reed voicing. With the voicing technique, it was now possible to give the free reeds the sound characteristics of other instruments, such as a clarinet, a bordon, a horn, etc., etc. For technical reasons, however, it was not possible to integrate the new variety of tones into the Melodeon. Because the space was too limited. Because the wind supply with just one bellows was not enough for more free reed rows. The highest level of development the Melodeon reached was 2 rows of free reeds with 2 keyboards. But there was still the problem of the limited wind supply. It was not possible to release the full power of Emmons Hamlin's twisted free reeds with the Melodeon. Since the Melodeon was limited in its construction, Emmons Hamlin was now looking for new ways to release the full power of his twisted free reeds. In 1853, Emmons Hamlin met Henry Mason. Emmons Hamlin may have met Henry Mason in a music store in New York. Henry Mason, music teacher, organist. Henry Mason was the son of Lowell Mason. Lowell Mason is considered the first significant music educator in the United States, and is credited with introducing music into American public schools. From the 1830s, music was offered in the USA, in the public education system in Boston. The Boston Academy of Music, founded in 1833 by Lowell Mason and William Channing Woodbridge. Similar to the ancient Zhou dynasty, music education was introduced to the USA because of moral and their physical or intellectual nature. Henry Mason and Emmons Hamlin decided to combine the technical knowledge of Emmons Hamlin with the Mason family network. Lowell Mason, together with businessman Oliver Ditson, invested in 1854 $10,000 in the founding of Mason and Hamlin. At first, M&H started to build Melodeon models, whereby Henry Mason and some of his family members concentrated on the business part and Emmons Hamlin was focused on technical developments. Two, the vision, only the best. Mason and Hamlin shared the vision that they wanted to build only the best instruments, with the highest possible technical development. An advertising from 1857 shows the path Mason and Hamlin chose to reach this goal. To see some of the first Mason and Hamlin Melodeon variants. In row 1 and 2 you can see 1 portable lyre leg melodeon, and 4 piano-style melodeons. Row 3 shows newly developed free reed organs. The first development phase of these new instruments began in 1855. Let's take a look at these 3 instruments. In the middle, you can see the organ melodeon. The organ melodeon is a melodeon variant that was also produced by other manufacturers, such as Carhart and Needham in New York, and, of course, by George A. Prince in Buffalo, New York. A similar instrument is described by George A. Prince as piano case, double reed melodeon, with 2 banks of keys. Which means that a second row of free reeds and a second row of keys were installed, but still had the limited melodeon wind supply of only 1 bellows. During my research, I could not find out who first developed the organ melodeon. The key evolution was not the organ melodeon, it was the 2 instruments to the right and left. And so in 1855 there appeared a new instrument, organ-harmonium, invented by Mason and Hamlin. In the first place a double bellows was introduced. Mason and Hamlin have added a double bellows. This means that the single bellows of the melodeon have been replaced by double bellows. These double bellows were operated alternately with the pedals, resulting in a constant supply of wind. The double bellows technique for free reed organs had already been used in Europe a few years earlier. The European harmonium, patented in 1842, already used double bellows. The first free reed organs were built in Europe, as early as 1810, already with double bellows. Further developments in Europe then led to the invention of the harmonium. The European harmonium was built with a pressure wind bellows technique, which in simple terms means that the wind is pressed outwards via the free reeds. This bellows technique became the standard for European free reed organs. European free reed organs with pressure wind bellows technology have since been generally called harmonium. Mason and Hamlin were inspired by the harmonium and tried to transfer the suction wind bellows technique of the melodeon into a harmonium case system. The first what they had to do was to modify the bellows system of the melodeon. The melodeon's 1 bellows system were turned into a 2 bellows system. In contrast to the European horizontal system, the bellows were installed vertically. The free reed and keyboard technology was mainly adopted from the melodeon. The transfer of the bellows under the keyboard has created free space in the upper section. Now the free reeds were more easily to reach. While the free reeds of a European harmonium were more difficult to reach. The newly developed technology has now been built into a harmonium-like case. What became the Mason and Hamlin harmonium and organ-harmonium? Seen in an advertisement from 1857. So the Harmonium and organ-harmonium, by Mason and Hamlin, was a further developed melodeon, in the case of a European harmonium. The organ-harmonium from Mason and Hamlin has won many awards in the USA. Mason and Hamlin did now set the standard for suction wind bellows free reed organs. 3. The Fire, cabinet organ born from the ashes. (1860), Mason and Hamlin built Melodeon models, and continued to develop their Harmonium models. Until in 1861, a catastrophe took place. A fire, in Cambridge Street this forenoon, destroyed Mason and Hamlin's Melodeon factory, with a large stock of instruments, fine lumber, varnish, turpentine, and c. Several adjacent buildings were also damaged. The loss is estimated at $35,000, with is partially insured. In the month of January, 1861, they met with what at the time appeared a great disaster, but which has in the end proved, in some sense, a substantial advantage. This was the entire destruction of their factory by fire. However, the fire was also seen as an opportunity for a new start. Having all their machinery to erect anew, they were enabled to take advantage of this experience, and to perfectly adapt it to those improved processes, of which they had found the advantage. Mason and Hamlin rebuilt the factory, where they continued to work on improving the harmonium and organ-harmonium. The popularity of the M&H harmonium organs soon led to attempts by other manufacturers to copy them. To protect their inventions from being copied, Mason and Hamlin gave the M&H harmonium a signature name. In 1863, the instruments were named cabinet organ, and the new name was registered as a copyright trademark. 1862, New Style Harmonium, Harmonium, Organ-harmonium, promoted in the New York Daily Tribune. Mason and Hamlin Catalog 1863, Cabinet Organs. The New Style Harmonium becomes the cabinet organ. The cabinet organ became the flagship of Mason and Hamlin. The developments of these new free reed organs replaced the melodeon instruments. George A. Prince, the largest melodeon manufacturer, was still trying to develop the melodeon further. But even the improved melodeon models could no longer keep up with the development. The limited wind supply continued, and so the melodeon disappeared from the market. Somewhat confusing from this transition period was the instrument's naming. The invention of the melodeon was elementary for the development of the cabinet organ. However, the melodeon could no longer keep up technically with the further developments of suction wind free reed organs. With the development of the cabinet organ, a new era of free reed organ manufacturing began in the USA. 4. The new factory in Boston. As you have already noticed, in 1861 the Mason and Hamlin factory burned down by a disastrous fire. But Mason and Hamlin built a new factory. The new factory was built on the same spot as the old, in Boston, Massachusetts corner Cambridge Charles Street. Marked on a map of Boston 1868. A bird's eye drawing from 1866 possibly shows what this new factory might have looked like. I also found a description of the new factory in the Chicago Tribune from 1865. Based on the description in the Chicago Tribune, floor plans from old maps of Boston, and the bird's-eye view from 1866, I tried to rebuild the Mason and Hamlin factory from 1861, as a 3D model. The report starts with taking the horse cars for the well-known and much-loved Harvard University. This Boston map from 1865 shows that a horse-drawn railroad line connects Boston with the Harvard University in Cambridge. The horse-drawn railroad line can also be seen on the bird's-eye view drawing from 1866. This line, or lines, passes directly in front of the new Mason and Hamlin factory building. The Chicago Tribune from 1865 tells when the columnist reached the Long Bridge, between Cambridge and Boston, on his way to Harvard University by horse-drawn streetcar, he saw a 5-story building, stretching about half a block across 2 streets. Boards indicated that cabinet organs were being built in that building. The report also states that there is another large building, on the other side of the bridge, where parts of the organ cases are made. According to the Chicago Tribune, to reduce the risk of fire, a superheated steam dryer for the lumber was also built, but diagonally across the street. In the bird's-eye view from 1866, it is probably the building with the chimney. Five, the first cabinet organs, produced in the new factory. After the new Mason and Hamlin factory was built in Boston in 1861, further developments of the free reed organ continued. 1862, Mason and Hamlin placed an advertisement in the New York Daily Tribune to promote its instruments. Promoted are portable-style melodeons, piano-style melodeons, organ melodeon. Harmoniums, organ-harmoniums, pedal-bass organ-harmonium. New-style harmonium and the school harmonium. These instruments can also be seen on the Mason and Hamlin advertisings from 1857 and 1860. The new-style harmonium and the school harmonium were a new development from 1862. The new-style harmonium from the 1862 advertisement was renamed to cabinet organ in 1863. Cabinet organs were developed and built in the new factory since 1863. How the new cabinet organ finally looked like can be seen in an M&H catalog from 1863. Warerooms in Boston and New York. A second edition of the same catalog from 1863 shows that Mason and Hamlin was also still building Melodeon models in 1863. According to the Cambridge Chronicle of 1875, Mason and Hamlin produced about 459 instruments in the first factory in the year of 1854. Around 6,500 instruments were built in the new factory in 1869. The factory continued to expand, but reached its limits in 1870. 6. New factory in Cambridge. The factory from 1861 in Boston was rebuilt several times and expanded more and more, but still became too small. An advertising card shows what the factory may have looked like around 1870. We will talk about this advertising card and the other buildings later on. After the factory in Boston reached its limit, a new location was needed. The next factory was planned, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, on the other side of the river, at 162 Broadway. On a close-up you can see that the new location was connected to the old location, with the horse-drawn railroad line. A bird's-eye view of Boston from 1899 shows the distance between the old and the new location. Two sources showing in detail what the new Mason and Hamlin factory in Cambridge may look like. Source 1. A report in the Cambridge Chronicle from 1875 show a drawing of the new factory. The drawing shows also the horse-drawn railroad line in front of the factory. Based on this drawing and floor plans, I tried to recreate this new factory as a 3D model. The new Mason and Hamlin factory can also be seen on a bird's-eye view map of Cambridge from 1879. Description of the new factory in the Cambridge Chronicle from 1875. The second source is also from the Cambridge Chronicle, but from 30 years later. You can recognize a railroad, and you can clearly see a second horse-drawn railroad line. In difference to the drawing from 1875, this drawing shows also basement windows. Factory with basement windows and a second horse-drawn railroad line. Old maps of Cambridge sometimes show the railroad and a floor plan of the Mason and Hamlin factory buildings. All activities are transferred from the Boston factory to the new factory in Cambridge in 1870. The old factory in Boston was now empty and was sometimes rented out to other companies. The old factory survived the Great Boston Fire of 1872. Later, the old factory building was probably converted into apartments. The building, that can always be seen in the background, and looks like a church, was the Charles Street Jail, or Suffolk County Jail. Charles Street Jail, built between 1848 and 1851, closed in 1990. The building is today a luxury hotel, the Liberty Hotel. However, the third Mason and Hamlin factory has now been built, in Cambridge 1870. The new factory in Cambridge had a connection to the horse-drawn railroad, a connection to the railroad, and a short distance to the harbor. Bird's eye view of Boston 1899. With a fireproof factory, connections to all transportation routes, and high-quality free reed organs, Mason and Hamlin was now ready to conquer the world. 7. Mason and Hamlin conquers the world. Mason and Hamlin won many awards in the USA, as early as 1856, for their first harmonium and organ-harmonium instruments. Their first factory in Boston burned down in 1861, and they built a better factory on the same spot. In the new factory, they continued to develop their suction wind harmonium instruments. However, as there were copies from other manufacturers, they renamed their harmonium instruments to cabinet organs. Mason and Hamlin not only wanted to be the best free reed organ builders in the USA, but also wanted to build the best instruments in the world. The cabinet organ were sent to international competitions. As early as 1867, Mason and Hamlin won a prize at the Great Exhibition in Paris, Europe. In 1870, a new factory was built in Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA. In 1873, Mason and Hamlin received another international award, at the World Exhibition in Vienna. Many more national and international awards followed. Due to its international success, Mason and Hamlin opened new showrooms. Its sale has extended, not only to all parts of America, but to all civilized countries. Mason and Hamlin had showrooms, wholesale depots, wholesale agents, and warerooms across the USA. Depots at New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Albany, Pittsburgh, Chicago, San Francisco, Toronto, Canada West. Mason and Hamlin had also showrooms in Europe, Vienna, London, Netherlands. And Mason and Hamlin had showrooms in Australia and New Zealand. Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, Launceston, Adelaide, Brisbane, Wellington. In a 1909 catalogue, Mason and Hamlin write that it is through their efforts that the American organ is now famous worldwide. Mason and Hamlin also states that they build their instruments to the highest technical standard for this class of instrument in the world. The standard of the world. In Europe, until the arrival of suction wind free reed organs from the USA, free reed organs were largely built with pressure wind bellows. The European pressure wind bellows free reed organs were and are generally called harmonium. Victor Mustel's Art Harmonium from 1853 is considered the pinnacle of harmonium development. The free reed organs from the USA, or suction wind free reed organs in general, such as the cabinet organs by Mason and Hamlin, are called American organ, reed organ, or pump organs. Mason and Hamlin also called their cabinet organs American organs. Both groups or variants have subgroups, with many other names. Mason and Hamlin were followed by many other manufacturers in the USA, but suction wind organs were also built in Europe after then. Harmonium is sometimes also used, as a general term, for both group of this instruments, suction or pressure wind. As this instruments were often used in small churches or chapels, they were sometimes nicknamed hallelujah pumps or monastery vacuum cleaners. Mason and Hamlin were pioneers in the introduction of the American suction wind bellows organ worldwide. The many awards led to great appreciation. 8. Advertising, trade cards, and catalogs. Mason and Hamlin placed advertisements in newspapers. Mason and Hamlin and their music store partners handed out trade cards. And you could order free Mason and Hamlin catalogs. Let's take a look at what was shown in the Mason and Hamlin advertising from 1857 to 1909. This illustration dates from 1857 and belongs to the founding period. It shows the first free reed organ models manufactured by Mason and Hamlin. All these instruments were built with suction wind bellows, which were newly developed in the USA in 1846 by Jeremiah Carhart in Buffalo. The first awards won by Mason and Hamlin are also shown on top. An advertising page from Mason and Hamlin from 1860 shows similar instruments. You can see free reed organ models, built in the first factory. The next models were already built in the new factory, which was built in 1861 at the same spot. Advertisement in the New York Tribune, January 1, 1862. A list of instruments, built in the new factory. The slogan is, "Get the best." The new style harmonium and the school harmonium were new products. In 1863 the name cabinet organ was introduced by Mason and Hamlin, as a copyrighted trademark. This was followed by a cabinet organ catalog, also in 1863. A second edition of the same catalog shows that in 1863 Mason and Hamlin still built also Melodeon organ models. 1864, L. H. Southard composes, 6 morceaux, expressly for the Mason and Hamlin cabinet organ. This advertising card is sometimes given the date, 1870. In any case, it dates from after 1866, as it shows the medal won at the Paris World's Fair of 1867. And almost surely from before 1873, as the medal won at the Vienna World's Exposition is not yet shown. On the small lettering below the building in the center you can read, "Front view of factory, Boston." I recreated the card with 3D models. The new factory layout is maybe recognizable in a Boston bird's eye view from 1879. At the corner top left you can see a Mason and Hamlin sales room in Boston, located at Tremont Street 154. At the corner top right you can see another sales room, located at 596 Broadway, New York. The top row shows standard cabinet organs. In the middle row you can see a cabinet organ with stops, and a cabinet organ with a foot pedal keyboard. The bottom row shows cabinet organs, with optical setups. These so-called tops are only built for decorative reasons. The pipes are faux, usually made of painted wood. (1871) Announcement in the Mineral Point Tribune. The 1874 catalog shows cabinet organs, in various styles. Cabinet organs artfully carved, or with optical attachments on top. These organs were already built in the new factory in Cambridge. Mason and Hamlin also shows many of its awards in this catalog. At the front you can see the medals from the World Exhibition in Paris in 1867, and the World Exhibition in Vienna in 1873. Advertising card from 1883. The same scenes in color. At many cards, you can see the Mason and Hamlin baby organ. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find out when Mason and Hamlin built the first baby organ. On the internet you can find pictures of preserved baby organs, from 1880 onwards. The baby organ, possibly developed around or before 1880. A Mason and Hamlin baby organ, played a major role in the history of Japan. A baby organ was the beginning of the worldwide successful company, Yamaha. Mason and Hamlin advertises churches, chapel and parlor organs with the addition, standard of the world. Advertising card with cabinet organs and piano models. Pianos have been developed and built by Mason and Hamlin since 1881-83. Some interesting pictures can also be seen in The History and Development of the American Cabinet Organ. In this book, Henry Lowell Mason traced the origins of the cabinet organ back to the European Bible Regal. The Bibel Regal was a small reed organ with stop reed technology that existed before the development of the first free reed organs in Europe. The book also shows all the important stages in the development of the cabinet organ. Also interesting is a Mason and Hamlin catalogue from 1909, published in Australia. The cover of the catalogue is maybe inspired by the paintings of Saint Cecilia, playing the positive organ. While the slogan on the banner of Saint Cecilia was, Cantantibus Organis, here it reads, "Ite well and they sing." The catalogue shows a selection of very modern Mason and Hamlin organ variants, with clean lines and clean shapes. These small compact free reed organs could be quickly and easily assembled, were available from several manufacturers. They were used for traveling, in foreign missions, or even in the military. Above or next to the awards you can often read, Palmum Kamerut Ferat, which in simple terms means, honor to those who deserve honor. 9. Franz Liszt and Victor Mustel organs. Mason and Hamlin supplied cabinet organs to a number of famous composers, one of whom was Franz Liszt. Liszt organ from the MH catalogue of 1909. For the first Liszt's organ, Mason and Hamlin received 2 medals from Franz Liszt himself, as head of the jury, at the Great World Exhibition in Paris, in 1878. Shortly afterwards, Mason and Hamlin launched a Liszt organ series, highly praised by composers. Alexander Guilmant is of beautiful tone. Gaston Dethier, I hear yet the exquisite sweetness of its tone. Arthur Nykish, remarkable power, orchestral in character. Anton Seidel, amazed and delighted me. Liszt models were included in the catalogue since 1877, advertised as especially suitable for churches and Sunday schools. Mason and Hamlin and Mustel. Mustel Story 1. Mason and Hamlin built one organ model with the European pressure wind bellows technique, the orchestral organ. It can probably be found in the Mason and Hamlin catalogue of 1892, as style 400. In one of the only 5 known organs, of which only 3 are still preserved, it could be discovered that these organs are equipped with Mustel technology that was developed before 1865. August Victor Mustel developed the art Harmonium in 1853. An improved version of the Harmonium. Mustel, together with his son, was also the inventor of the Celesta, a percussion idiophone in the shape of a small piano. In the 1960s, Mustel harmoniums were probably sent to Mason and Hamlin in Boston, and years later packed into a new case. The serial number on this surviving instruments indicates that it was probably built in 1890. Mustel story 2. There may have been a contract between Alphonse Mustel and Mason and Hamlin, whereby Mustel organs were to be manufactured in the USA by Mason and Hamlin. Whether the contract was ever executed is probably not known. The relationship between Mason and Hamlin and Mustel is not entirely clear, and very thin on sources. But since both worked on the highest possible developments of suction wind or pressure wind free reed organs, they must have watched each other's careers with interest. 10. Technical developments by Mason and Hamlin. Mason and Hamlin was founded 1854 by Henry Mason and Emmons Hamlin. Henry Mason took care of the business side, and Emmons Hamlin took care of the technical side. Emmons Hamlin brought some technical knowledge to the company, having previously worked for several years as a tuning supervisor at George A. Prince in Buffalo. One of the developments Emmons Hamlin made and brought to Mason and Hamlin was the free reed voicing. After the founding of Mason and Hamlin in 1854, the company built melodeons. As early as 1855, their first improved organs were developed. From 1863, the improved Mason and Hamlin free reed suction wind organs were now named cabinet organs. But a few new inventions were necessary to turn the melodeon into a cabinet organ. The melodeon has just one pedal for the bellows. A first improvement was to convert the one bellows with one pedal to a two-pedal double alternating bellows. The new double bellows were installed vertically below the mechanism, also creating new free space in the upper part. On the melodeon, the second pedal is used for the swell. Since the cabinet organ now requires both pedals for the bellows, an extra pedal was set up for the swell. To operate the swell pedal while playing, you had to remove your foot from the bellows pedal, which interrupts the smooth flow of wind. To solve this problem, Mr. George Woods invented the automatic bellows swell for the cabinet organ in 1862. Mr. George Woods was technically very skilled, who, like Emmons Hamlin, had previously worked for George A. Prince in Buffalo. Sources show that Mr. George Woods was involved in the development, or co-ownership, of some of the most important free reed organ companies in the USA. He even founded a free reed organ factory himself. Patents developed by George Woods for Mason and Hamlin. George Woods and Emmons Hamlin developed the new patents in the founding period at Mason and Hamlin. One of this patent was the automatic bellows swell invented by George Woods in 1862. The advantage of this new invention was that you no longer had to take your foot off the bellows pedal for the swell. How it works. A wire is attached to the outer bellows plate. When the vacuum bellows is contracted, the wire lifts the swell cover upwards. If air is now released from the vacuum bellows, by pressing a key, the vacuum bellows expands, and the wire closes the swell. The automatic bellows swell can be easily deactivated by simply turning the wire away. To achieve the full effect of the automatic swell, the swell pedal should be closed. The automatic bellows swell does not affect the foot pedal swell. The knee stop. The knee stop is found in all cabinet organs with two sets of free reeds. The cabinet organ knee stop was used to open the front swell cover. Vertical double bellows, automatic bellows swell, and knee stop were the first important developments for the cabinet organ. Later many more inventions were added, such as the octave coupler, the Fox-Humana fan, different stop techniques, or a second knee pedal. You can see how all these components work and are built in a technical video at the end of this USA Free Reed Organ History series. Stay tuned. The 1863 catalog also shows how you can reach and replace the free reeds. Who invented what? And when, is not as clear as often told by the free reed organ companies in their catalogs. Depending on the source, you can find different inventors of the same parts at different times. Mason and Hamlin mentioned in a catalog from 1863 the imperfections of the Melodeon, compared to their cabinet organ, but in a second edition of the same catalog from 1863, one can see that they still produced the imperfect Melodeon. Without the development of the Melodeon by Jeremiah Carhart, George A. Prince, and Elias P. Needham, the history of the American organ would not have been the same. Many of the components of the Melodeon can also be found in the first harmonium, organ-harmonium, and cabinet organ models, by Mason and Hamlin. And later in the American organ, reed organ, or pump organ models. The Melodeon was only limited in its further development because of its small space, but inspired other organ builders to further developments. American free reed organs often have different names, such as chapel organ, parlor organ, salon organ, etc., etc. If church, parlor, or salon organs by Mason and Hamlin, they can generally be called cabinet organs. A second main group of Mason and Hamlin free reed organs are the Liszt organs, which have somewhat different components to the cabinet organs. 11. Unit sales, and the end of the free reed organ. Until Jeremiah Carhart invented a suction wind bellows variant for free reed organs, in Buffalo, New York in 1846, no more than 300 free reed organs were built in the USA, at all. These first 300 free reed organs in the USA, indiscriminately called Melodeon or Seraphine, were mostly copies of European pressure wind bellows free reed organs. In 1847, the first American suction wind bellows organ was developed, the improved Melodeon. Developed by Jeremiah Carhart, George A. Prince and Elias P. Needham, in Buffalo, New York. Jeremiah Carhart sold licenses of his suction wind bellows technology to several manufacturers, who began to build melodeons. The improved melodeon became a popular musical instrument because of various factors, and was sold several thousand times. The sales soon reached tens of thousands. But with 2 rows of free reeds, and only 1 bellows pedal, the limits of this instrument were soon reached. Mason and Hamlin wanted to improve the melodeon, and build the best possible free reed organ with suction wind technology. 1855, Mason and Hamlin now developed the melodeon into a new instrument, with more wind power, with more free reed rows and with new technical inventions. The new box design was quickly adopted by other American manufacturers of free reed organs, which is why Mason and Hamlin introduced the copyright trademark cabinet organ for their organs in 1863. The box design, with the main feature of 2 upright suction wind bellows, was to become the American free reed organ, also known as the reed organ or pump organ. The American organ became even more successful than the melodeon. In the years of 1847 through 1930, there were more than 600 suction wind bellows free reed organ manufacturers in the USA. Employed tens of thousands of workers. There were companies that built tens of thousands of organs a year, while other companies built a few hundred a year. These manufacturers produced different models. Without a top, with a painted wooden pipe top, with a foot pedal keyboard. For the parlor, for the church, for the theater. But all these instruments are built on the same principle, using the upright suction wind bellows. Mason and Hamlin was one of the most important and successful manufacturers of these organs, in the USA, and worldwide. Mason and Hamlin built probably more than 200,000 free reed organs. Exact numbers cannot be verified, due to lack of sources or unclear serial numbers. On the peak, Mason and Hamlin employing about 500 workers and built around 200 instruments a week. Around 1881, Mason and Hamlin began developing also pianos, and was then renamed Mason and Hamlin Organ and Piano. The Mason and Hamlin piano were also very successful, but that is another story. Interestingly, George Woods, who introduced the automatic swell at Mason and Hamlin in 1862, also offered pianos in 1882, which he probably manufactured in a factory in Cambridgeport, near the Mason and Hamlin factory. The beginning of a new era. 1877, the phonograph is invented by Edison. 1878, the graphophone is invented by Bell and Tainter. 1887, the gramophone is invented by Berliner. After the First World War, many companies left the reed organ business, and some specialized in piano building. In many homes, the radio replaced music home entertainment. The end of the free reed organs took place around the 1930s. The free reed organ production ended in 1927, at Mason and Hamlin. Or abruptly in 1917, depending on the source. In the 20th century, the Mason and Hamlin ownership changed several times. The factory building in Cambridge was probably sold, around 1930. The electric organ, the keyboard, were the final end of the free reed organ. The fairy tale of the free reed organ lasted less than a century, in the USA. But the Mason and Hamlin piano manufacturing was continued. Mason and Hamlin Piano continued to exist as an own brand in the companies during the entire change of ownership. In 1986, Mason and Hamlin was moved to Haverhill. In 1996, Mason and Hamlin was bought by Berget. Even if the cabinet organ, alias the American organ, was probably not the key factor in the rise of the new nation of the USA, its impact on society should not be underestimated. The Melodeon made it possible for families to purchase a cheap musical instrument, with a sound volume of several octaves, that hardly ever went out of tune. The folding Melodeon variants could be played anywhere, and were often taken on the long journey to the West. The more advanced variants of these organs, such as Mason and Hamlin's cabinet organs, or the Estes cottage organs, became even more popular. The American organ was the pride of every family, and was even taken to the most isolated places. Now everyone could turn their home into a small theater, a small chapel, or a salon. The ancient Chinese believed that cultivated music had a great influence on people's emotions and social morals. With the invention of the American organ, it was now possible for everyone to build social morality by learning this instrument and cultivating themselves. These instruments not only brought noise to the most isolated places in the West, but, according to the wisdom of the ancient Chinese, they also brought culture and morality to families. See in the next part. The incredible story of how a refugee orphan boy built the world's largest free reed organ factory in Brattleboro, Vermont.